beginning with the first verse. Quote, I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our forefathers were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, and their bodies were scattered over the desert. Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank, and got up to indulge in pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test the Lord as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to them as examples, and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will always provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. Now, since it's been a while since we've gathered here, if you remember my last sermon, I talked about the book of Bob, about all the things people say are in the Bible that aren't in there. And I wanted to pull up another one of those to talk about today. How many of you have ever heard somebody say, God will not give you more than you can bear? We probably all have. That is not what the scripture says. It's close. He says, God will not let you be tempted more than you can bear. Now there's a big difference there. What is God saying to the people? What is Paul trying to get across? Well, this is not about what you can handle, what you can bear. It's about temptation. And what Paul is saying is, hey, your ancestors, they were tempted and many of them failed the test. They gave in to their temptations and they suffered accordingly. So if you think that you stand firm, watch out. Because those same temptations are in your path as well. But then he goes on further and says, but don't worry, God won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. He said, what you're tempted with, everybody's tempted with. He's saying, you're not special. What a great motivational message to hear. You're not special. But sometimes that's the motivational message some people need to hear. Don't think you're better than anybody else. Don't think you've had it harder than anybody else. Don't think it's tougher for you than anybody else. He says all these temptations you face, everybody faces them. These are not special temptations that were put in place just for you. That's the world we live in, and it's full of temptation. And he goes on and says something that's very important. He said, whenever you're tempted, God gives you a way out. I remember I served on a board for my denomination, I was a Quaker, and it was like the elders of the church, but for the denomination. And we had a pastor that had engaged in an affair with a church member. And obviously it was a difficult situation. But I remember when he came to speak to the board, and he said, well, it just happened. And one of the women on the board said, no, it didn't. She goes, I guarantee you there were 20 times you could have stopped it before it happened. It's like when you're looking at the sign on the highway and it says, lane closed ahead, 2 miles. Well, I'm going to stay in the right lane until I get there. Lane closed ahead, 1 mile. Well, this lane's still going faster than the one on the left, so I'm going to stay here. Lane closed 500 yards, You keep going. You don't take the chance to move over where you're supposed to be. When it's clear, then you're stuck there at the end waiting for somebody to let you in. Every temptation, we have chances to say, I think I'm going the wrong way, I better turn around. We have chances to say, I need to get off this exit. I need to stop going in this direction. Most of the time we go into temptation with our eyes wide open because we're staring exactly at what's tempting us. We go in knowing that we're treading on dangerous ground. That's what the scripture that is most misquoted says. You're not special. And if you fall to temptation, you can't blame God for giving you too much. You have every opportunity not to fall. But what's bad about this misunderstanding of this scripture, that God will not give you more than you can bear, is that besides being misquoting scripture, it's also wrong on the face of it. Because God absolutely will give you more than you can bear. Sorry. It's not all sunshine and roses. And anybody who grows roses knows that if it's all sunshine, you don't have roses. But it's not all good. In fact, God intentionally gives us more than we can bear. And you go, wait, I thought God loved me. Why is he giving me more than I can bear if he loved me? But think about your life as a believer. Look back on it. You have endured more than you could bear. You have been through things that were too great for you to get through yourself. You have accomplished things that you could never do and still can't do. Paul says this himself in 2 Corinthians in the 1st chapter. He said, God gave me more than I could bear. Paul goes on to brag about all the things he had to bear. And it's almost like he's saying, look how great I am, look how strong I am, look what I endured. But he's not. He says, I couldn't bear those things, but Christ through me bore those things. I look back on my ministry and there have been dark times. There have been times of despair. There have been times of sadness and grief. There have been times when my prayers have been groans too great for words, could not express myself in words that could be understood. There have been times when I have literally collapsed from the weight that I bore in ministry. And at those times, God picked me up. Or in those times, God sent somebody else to pick me up. I remember one time, and I don't even remember what set it off, but actually I do. There was a funeral at my church from a member. And a previous pastor had been invited to the funeral. And I didn't mind that he was doing the funeral. I hadn't even been told about the funeral. And I was hurt. And I'm in the parsonage right next to the church. And I see all the cars at the church, and my wife goes over and asks what's going on. And she comes back and she said, they're having a funeral for so-and-so. You ought to get up and go over there. And I didn't want to get out of bed. I was so hurt that not only did they invite the last pastor to do it, but they didn't even let me know the guy had died. And she asked me, she said, you need to get up, and I turned over. Well, that wasn't good enough for her. And the next thing I know, my blanket has been jerked off of me. And she's standing and she said, you are getting up and you are taking a shower and you are going over to the church. And you will not be scowling when you get over there. I needed that. I could not bear what I felt was the disrespect. I had no problem with the previous pastor doing the funeral, but I thought somebody at least should have let me know, hey, so-and-so died and there's a funeral this week at the church, at your church. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it alone. But I didn't have to bear it alone. Now, looking back, I can say, yes, I was being petty and childish. And I was. But at that moment, that was more than I could bear. For whatever reasons. I've dealt with deaths of mentors and parents. I couldn't bear them. I've dealt with the death of a child. That's impossible to bear. Anyone who's buried their own child knows this. But we don't bear it alone. God gives us more than we can handle. One of my favorite lines from a Disney movie is from Return of Jafar. Now, Jafar is the villain in the first movie, and at the end he gets turned into a genie. And when he comes back, he's got to follow the rules of being a genie, one of which is you can't kill anybody. And one of his victims points this out to him, hey, you can't kill me. And Jafar goes, true, but you'd be surprised what you can live through. Turn that around a little bit. God won't give you more than you can bear, but you would be surprised what you can handle because you got Him. We can endure more than we ever thought possible. We can accomplish more than we ever dreamed of. Because we do not bear our